In my career, I've sat across the table from more than 100 witnesses in formal. I've watched the full spectrum of the human animal under pressure. The liars, the saints, the corporate warriors, the whistleblowers, and the people who were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. And here is the professional secret that no one warned you about. A witness will almost always say something in the first 5 minutes that makes you want to deliver a final judgment about them on the spot. They will arm themselves with arrogance. They'll fire off an answer that sounds like a rehearsed alibi. They might hit you with a smirk or a wink that makes you want to categorize them as guilty or difficult or toxic or a liar. But if I snapped that folder shut, shoved back my chair, and walked out of every deposition room after those 5 minutes, I wouldn't just be wrong, I'd be committing professional malpractice. Because the value of a deposition does not live in the snap judgment. The value lives in exhaustive discovery. Out here in the real world, outside the court reporter's office or the courtroom or the deposition room, we have lost our collective patience for discovery. We are living in a high-velocity judgment culture, and our subconscious is sprinting for shortcuts. We catch one political take, we clock one bumper sticker, we overhear one offhanded comment, and boom. We label them immediately, we throw them into a category, we lock the door, and we lose the key. We tell ourselves we're being efficient, if we tell ourselves anything at all. We tell ourselves we're being safe. But what we're actually doing is we are shrinking our world until there's no room left for anyone except for us. Today, I'm making the case for avoiding the 10-second trap. I'm asking you to adopt a lawyer's mindset to lead with curiosity, to chase the why behind the what, and to stay in that room asking questions long after your ego has already started looking for the exit. Because guess what? The shortcut to being right is the longest road to being lonely. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we are living through a national deficit of connection. Welcome back to The Case For. I'm your host, Matt Campobasso, and I'm very grateful that you're joining me today. Our world moves at a velocity that human biology was not designed to sustain. We are absorbing thousands of data points every single hour, and because that stream never stops, our brains have hijacked an ancient survival mechanism, groupthink, and they've repurposed it as a filtration system. It worked when we had to make life or death decisions in the moment upon seeing an animal coming towards us. But in 2026, it's a trap. We have turned our entire lives into speed dating for our own prejudices. We see a logo, a news source, a single phrase, and within seconds, we've constructed a full 360-degree personality profile of the person standing in front of us. We are confusing categories with character, and it is costing us more than we know. So the truth is never really found in the snapshot. And I've talked about that concept here on the podcast previously. For example, when I mentioned we shouldn't just take the worst page of someone's book and assume that's the whole story. But here, as someone who has spent hundreds of hours in the discovery phase of litigation over a 10-year period, I can tell you this with conviction. Every single person has a why, a history, a set of incentives and specific wounds that built their worldview from the ground up. When we write someone off as just being that way, we are not just dismissing them. We are actually making a conscious decision to throw away the data that could help improve our own thinking. We are choosing the silo over the solution. So today, I want to show you how to trade your snap verdicts for a patient deposition in the courtroom of life. Exhibit A. The biological shortcut and the price of efficiency. So your brain is working overtime to save you energy, always. In a world that moves as quickly as ours, it has to. But sometimes it does so by lying to your face. Neuroscience tells us that the brain is a prediction machine. To conserve processing power, it builds templates for people. When you encounter someone new, it scans your brain, finds the nearest match in its database, and it issues a verdict. I like this person, I don't like that person, they're right, they're left, they're good, they're bad. And in doing so, you oftentimes write someone off before you really take the chance to get to know them. That was a life-saving tool when you needed to read a shadow on the savannah thousands of years ago. If the shadow has a mane, you don't need to pet it, you run. But that's a catastrophic tool in a polarized workplace, a divided family dinner, or a fractured community. While the label that you're given feels like clarity, it's actually a blindfold. Every single time you put a human being into a box, you forfeit two things simultaneously: your ability to influence them, and, far more dangerously, your ability to be influenced by what they might actually know. Efficiency and judgment is the mortal enemy of wisdom. Which brings us to Exhibit B, the deposition discipline. So I want to hand you a tool that comes right out of the practice of law, specifically litigation. And what I'm calling it is the deposition discipline. In a deposition, a lawyer's job is not to find a reason to set the witness aside. The job is to find a reason or an angle from which to dig deeper. When a witness says something that sounds ridiculous or contradictory, I don't roll my eyes, grab my notepad, and walk out of the room. I lean in. I say, hey, tell me more about that. How did you arrive at that conclusion? Walk me through the moment that shaped it. We would all be much more effective and more powerful if we adopted this degree of disciplined patience out in the real world. Why does someone hold the belief they hold? What was the first time they felt that way? What are they afraid will happen if they turn out to be wrong? When you start asking why, you stop seeing a caricature and start seeing a human being. And curiosity, by you and by that person, is the only thing that's stopping you from being a caricature yourself. So take a moment and apply that discipline in the world. Rather than write somebody off the next time you encounter an opinion that's contrary to yours, ask a question or two or three or 10. Take the time to get to know someone. Not everybody, not a random stranger standing next to you at the Target checkout, but at a dinner party or a work function or a child's baseball game. There's nothing wrong with asking questions. Either you're going to learn that your initial reaction was right or close to it, or you're going to prove yourself wrong. Either way, there's a depth in your conviction at that point. That brings us to Exhibit C. Misunderstanding is a tax. It's a massive compounding tax on your professional output and your personal relationships. In business, the moment you decide a colleague is just that way, you stop doing the work required to find the common ground need for execution. What you've just launched is what I call trench warfare. Communication goes underground, assumptions metastasize, and people start narrating about the intent of others. They don't care about the mission. They're lazy. They're just being difficult. They're not that smart. And once you have trench warfare, you can bury your ambitions for speed, creativity, and innovation. Nobody takes risks around people who they believe had already reached a verdict about them. Connection is not about surrendering your beliefs. Connection is about acknowledging the reality of the person across from you so you can actually get something done. Exhibit D. So let's go right to the headline of this episode. Why is the 10-second trap making us lonely? When we judge someone quickly, we curate our lives down to a very small circle, a circle of people who agree with us 100% of the time. But that circle does not provide real community. That circle is essentially a hall of mirrors. It feels safe. It's hollow. We are lonelier right now than at any recorded point in modern history, not because we have fewer people around us, but because we've replaced the messy, friction-filled, genuinely difficult work of understanding with sterile, effortless work of grouping. Real connection requires the friction of difference. It requires that exhaustive discovery. So when you write someone off as one of those people, you're not just losing them. You are losing the version of yourself that is large enough to contain more than one perspective. You are shrinking into your own certainties. All right, that's all the evidence for today. But no case survives without being tested under fire. So let's take a look at a handful of objections. Objection 1. Matt, some people are just bad people, or they're looking for a fight. Why should I offer patience and the skill of an attorney to someone who just wants to dunk on me? By taking the time to understand them, aren't I just validating their behavior, or worse, their dangerous idea? I hear it. I do. When I listen to that objection, I can acknowledge how that might be a snap judgment. And that's probably the objection that I expect most people are having listening to this episode in the rage bait culture of 2026. But let's follow the logic all the way through. If you treat everyone like a troll, you become a troll. You become a person who is sealed shut against the world, reacting with the same reflex you claim to despise. So here's the distinction that I think changes everything. Understanding is not signing off on someone's perspective. It's not an endorsement. It's a tactical diagnostic. When a doctor studies a virus, they're not validating the virus. They are mapping its structure so they can destroy it effectively. So if you refuse to understand how someone arrived at an idea that you oppose, you're choosing to remain uninformed. And in every negotiation I've ever sat in, the person with the most data wins. So don't let 1% of the bad faith actors on the internet train you to treat the other 99% of people in your actual life, your team, your neighbors, your family, like villains. You don't owe energy to every stranger in the comment section, but you do owe it to your own intellectual growth to stay curious about the people who are actually in the room with you. So I'm going to overrule that objection. Objection number 2. What about the time it takes? I'm at capacity. I don't have bandwidth to run a deposition on every person I encounter. This 10-second snap judgment is just the price of being a high performer. I'm going to push back on that one and call bullshit. Is it efficient when a project that you're working on with the team craters because you misread your lead engineer's concerns? Is it efficient when a marriage fractures because you decided your partner was just that way instead of asking what was going on underneath the surface? We think snap judgments save us time. What they actually create is a debt of misunderstanding, and over time, that debt compounds. We spend hours venting about people to third parties. We burn days dwelling on perceived slights. We lose years living in the fallout of broken trust. The 10-second shortcut creates a decade of interest payments. A lawyer's mindset isn't about spending 8 hours buying a cup of coffee. It's a mental posture. It's the 10-second delay. It's holding your judgment in a stay of execution just long enough to ask, what am I missing here? True high performance isn't about moving fast into a wall. It's about moving at the speed of trust. So I'm going to overrule that objection too. Finally, our closing argument. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the world we live in is accelerating. And the temptation to judge, to label, to dismiss, to archive and move on has never been stronger. Outrage feels like strength. Certainty feels like a shield. But look around and be honest. Are we stronger? Are we more secure? Or are we just more divided and alone? The 10-second trap is a prison we build for ourselves, brick by brick, verdict by verdict. The moment you decide that someone is one of those people, you stop being a leader and you start being a follower of your own ego. When you do this in the workplace, you trade the chance to build a high-functioning team, a team engineered to win, for a room full of people who just look and think exactly like you do. And that room doesn't need a leader. It needs a mirror. The country we live in does not need more silos. Your family doesn't need more walls. Your company does not need more trench warfare. Adopting a lawyer's mindset in this regard is not about the law. It's about having the professional and personal courage to stay curious when it would be so much easier to be certain. So stay in that room. Ask the why question. Most people are carrying a weight you know absolutely nothing about. Find common ground, not because everyone's right, but because you're big enough to understand how they might be wrong. Do not let that trap close on you. Stay curious. Stay human. Before we wrap up this episode, I want to move out of the courtroom and into the real world and talk a little bit about some of the tools that we might be able to take into our lives to help us accomplish these things and to avoid that 10-second trap. Tool number 1, the origin inquiry. The next time someone triggers your judgment reflex, don't argue with their conclusion. Ask about the origin. Use this exact phrase. Help me understand how you got there. It's clinical, it's non-combative, it drops the other person's identity shield and gives you access to the inputs that you're probably missing. Micro tool number 2, the snapshot audit. Identify one person in your life that you filed away as just one of those people. And this week, Find one thing that you have in common with that person that has nothing to do with the topic you disagree on. A sports team, a parenting struggle, a movie, a hobby, a band. And then rehumanize that data point and try to reconnect with them. Micro tool number 3, the discovery delay. When you feel the urge to stamp a label on someone, just stop immediately. In legal terms, what you're doing there is you're staying the judgment until discovery is complete. Give that person and the situation one more minute or one more question of understanding. And why, you ask? Because oftentimes, real growth happens in the minute after you want to leave. Micro tool number 4, the mirror mercy test. So before you write someone off for a bad 10 seconds, ask yourself, what is the worst 10-second snapshot of my entire life? And would I want to be judged by it forever? Extend the grace of that context that you would want extended to you. Put simply, the thread that runs through all of these ideas and these micro tools is curiosity. We are programmed genetically to think quickly, to move through the world making snap judgments. But stop for a moment and think about what value you might find, what connections you might be able to build, or relationships you might be able to save if you led with that curiosity and tried to step over that 10-second trap and decide that you want to understand a situation, even if that means ultimately you don't agree with it. The moment you decide that someone is one of those people, you have fallen into the 10-second trap. It's not going to be 10 seconds every time, but hopefully you understand the concept as I've laid it out here today. You stop learning and you've started shrinking. So stay in the room. Continue the conversation. Stay curious. Most importantly, stay human. If this episode landed, if it made you rethink even one relationship, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and share this show with someone who needs to hear the why behind the what. Find us on social media with the hashtag #TheCase4. And if you'd like to, tell me about a time that a single question broke a stalemate and built something real. I promise to read every one. Thanks for being here. And remember, whatever your case is, don't be afraid to build it and carry it out into the real world.